only one thing should have one use, and that's a weapon system. Everything else should have multiple uses possible.
Welcome to the Texas Embassy Podcast. I'm actually really excited about this interview. It's been a long time coming. You were quite foundational to me growing here in Texas, and I'm really excited that others get to know you. So with that, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mark. As always, I'm always interested in doing these things with you because we always go off in a unique direction.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting.
So I'm Rich Julian. I'm a partner at Boca Capital. We're a growth stage investment firm. So what that really means is we write checks from $10 million to $100 million. But generally speaking, we're post Series A. So we're a little bit beyond the early stage companies. So we look for companies that are ready to roll there. I've been in this game for 40 odd years. Started in the military as an enlisted guy back in the 1980s. Then got a commission, but the whole time I was in the military, I was in advanced technology programs. I got drafted. I showed up my first unit and I fixed a computer for some DARPA guys. So they brought me on their program. So I've been working in technology innovation ever since then. Done everything from small programs to large demonstration programs. Predator UAV was one of the programs I worked on. Not the flight systems, but the back end or the intelligence collection packages. When I got out of the military, I was recruited, I guess is the best way to say it. I was brought over to the CIA and spent the next 20 odd years there. 20 odd years, and then I left a couple of times to start companies. Once successfully, it went great. Sold the company and went back in after 9/11. So many of us did. The next time I got out was in 2008, which was not the best time to start a company, but things happen. Then when I got out of the government in 2016, I spent 8 years designing, building, and then running Amazon's national security, defense, and space startup business. So again, continuing the technology innovation themes going into it. And as part of that, Amazon asked me to move down to Texas as all the defense and innovation programs were leaving Silicon Valley because it was just too expensive for government people to be there.
Were you in the Valley?
Yeah,
at the
in
time?
Silicon Valley. And when they moved me down here to Texas, and I've been here ever since the beginning of 2019. By background, I'm a lifelong Californian. My family on both sides, my mom's and my dad's, predates the state of California.
We won't edit that out, Rich. We'll keep that in.
I don't mind it. We predate the state of California, so we've been around there. I grew up as a cattle ranching family, so I've always been kind of on the edge of I love being involved in local and regional stuff, but also I have this intense desire to support national security, so I get pulled up into the global international stages. So some days you feel like going and talking to a cow, and some days you feel like going and talking to a congressman. You get about the same response.
That's a that's a lead-in tagline right there, man. For the intro. I know exactly what you mean. That's interesting you say that, right? There's times where you find comfort in just getting out and being back on the ranch and just not thinking about this, but you carry that burden now that you know about the importance of global security, national security, all the way down to bending metal or soldering a chip. You can kind of see that.
Well, it also helps you to remember that everything starts at these very local areas and very small scale farms and ranches and stuff like that, all the way up through national interest stuff. And so I've never lost sight of the fact that, hey, if people aren't feeding us, if we're not getting food and we don't have fuel to get food places, that's a real problem. So national security is food security, is energy resilience, is supply chain. So I've never forgotten that national security goes down to the true grassroots. People talk about it, but they often forget it because they get focused on the latest and greatest technologies and forget all of the other stuff underneath it.
No, that's important. And I think that even the audience that we surround ourselves with in the defense and national security, I mean, we rotate base to base, right? Unless you're just in that center of excellence. And to some degree, And it wasn't, I really didn't, not that I didn't think about it, but I didn't appreciate where I landed. Right now, I'm outside the base and understand the economic development and the impact of certain things. And to your point, right, trace lining all the way back to quality of life. Where do we get our food? That's of national importance.
And I think it's also for those of us that have come through the military and have been through that, is to understand the importance of service and also what it means to serve. And whether it's military service or first responders, stuff like that, how do you support those missions? Because they're different, right? And the challenges faced by a local emergency management person and somebody faced by FEMA from a hurricane or military responders, the technologies that support all those, the capabilities that enable that are pretty much the same all the way through. It's a sense of scale. It's a sense of the individual mission itself, right? I always like to tell people in the military, they always think, oh, we are super special snowflakes, right? Nobody does anything like we do. It's like, no, they actually do. This happens everywhere. You just do different things with the missions, or you have different impacts that go into it. So that also helps with the understanding of technology and innovations, that you can see an innovation in one area, you can take a look at it and you can say, ooh, I see how that could support a national security mission. One of the companies that's in my portfolio is an audio technology company, and they were totally focused on commercial industry. And the first time I saw them, I'm like, oh, I know a lot of people in the military who could use your technology. And so using that kind of dual understanding, we began to start pivoting them into a dual use mindset. Even though I hate the term dual use, the idea is that these technologies that can support across a broad range of capabilities, that's what we and my team look for in investments, right? Things that have more than one capability to support it. Only one thing should have one use, and that's a weapon system. Everything else should have multiple uses possible.
Rich, I've been contemplating this definition. The word, I won't repeat it, but you said it first. We just start the bingo game. But that definition was started in the military, right? It was that application, and then it could be used somewhere else. But the technology has broader applications across government, right? Whether it's federal, state, local. And that's kind of the definition that we carry of that duality. It's yes, there's commercial application and government application, but I even wrestle with that's not good enough, because in business there are crossovers that should happen, right? And because the demand signal may be on one side versus the other. And I think that's the opportunity for that business and the investors as well, is to not just be singularly stuck in that way. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
So government people tend to get focused on their view of the world, and they have they often forget that there are others that are out there. And so when I look at it from an investor's lens, nobody wants two uses, right? You want multiple uses. The value of a product, whatever product it is you're creating, of whether it's software, hardware, it doesn't matter, is how many verticals can you support? How many different customer bases can you open? How many different markets can you go into? How many different countries can you export it to? A online bookseller, Amazon, can become a global powerhouse because they keep adding to the respective markets they can reach out and touch. You could say the same thing about Apple. You could say the same thing about NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA started as a video chip company,
right,
and they've greatly expanded beyond that as they came up with new capabilities. So it's finding that sweet spot where you have your core market, and I tell this to founders I work with. You have that core market, that's great. Nail that first customer, support that customer, build them into your best friend, and they'll keep coming back to you. But success is, how many other non-aligned customers can you find? So a customer that's not that same customer. It's easy if you're selling to the US Army to say, oh, I could sell to the French Army, to the Australian Army.
Sure.
But could I also use that to support an energy company? Now you're in the commercial markets, and a huge commercial market. Can I use that same technology to support a local school system? And again, these technologies, the ability to spread it into a spectrum of markets and verticals you can enter into, broadens your customer base, broadens your revenue potential. it makes you more interesting as an investment. And from a government perspective, if you step back to that, it also reduces my need for maintaining the O&M, which is the real cost of every system. Because if I'm not the only person employing that product, I will benefit from the advances and developments made by somebody else. Whereas if I own, control, and create a bespoke solution all the time, I'm responsible for everything supporting that over its lifetime. And that's a huge cost, which, I mean, that's always been the major impact for the military. They want to create the my system only with my requirements,
Right.
my this, and it's only going to live within my respects. And that means it's not as investable. It doesn't have as much market potential, the ability to make the revenue to offset what the government has to put into it. And I think that the real change that I've seen over the last 10 years is more and more the government is beginning to realize, hey, I don't have the only need spaces that are out there. Can I tap into those other markets? Hey, what do you know? I can amortize costs because different industries can help me offset my costs.
Yes.
And that's something the government has always been horrible at. But I think the most important thing that's happened in probably in the last 5 years, I'd say, is it's really the government has started to realize we can't do that. And I need industry to come along with me. That's, as you know, is a really hard mindset change from people in the government and really a hard mindset change for people in commercial industry. Well, I don't do what the government does.
Yeah, even to the point where the same tool sets or skill sets are even within the government, right? And so they can develop things, but the commercialization or the capitalism ecosystem is the driver for it to continually be utilized or update to where there's a relevance of that use. And that may not carry the same power given that the military rotates around, right? And so is this a system that can be developed internal that would obviously be used, but the sustainability of that, you're at the beck and call or you're at the behest of the system itself.
Well, I think also that, you worked extensively with SOCOM, and I think that the thing that SOCOM did so well that the rest of the military is trying to adopt is recognize successful capabilities don't have singular uses, right? If you build a product to do one thing and one thing only, that's great. It solves a mission need, but now you can't apply it when the mission changes. And the mission always changes, whether it's the temperature changes because I'm going from cold to hot weather to the desert to seaborne to whatever. That ability to have that capability that can extend into multiple things, that flexibility, the agility of the product is so key. And I think that the Defense Department has always focused on single use. I build a product to do this. And without realizing that then that's all that it does. Mm-hmm. And it's the old joke of if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
That's right.
And so more and more, I think the Defense Department, and it's really been clear with the U.S. Army after the stand-up of Futures Command, they're really focused on how do we build the most flexible capabilities so that I do build it to solve a problem, but now it could be applied against other problems that I have, even problems I don't know about yet,
right.
But it has that flexibility, the mission packages, the ability to change what that's going to be delivered to it. That's great for certain kinds of systems, but we also have to start building our hardware and software in the same way. You wouldn't accept a cell phone that only made phone calls. You wouldn't accept a cell phone that only talked to one network service, right? You want to be able to see multiple different things, multiple different apps.
Well, yeah, because it evolved that's an actual mobile platform
yep.
for other use cases, right? So even the originality of the form factor, like you said, have other opportunities.
When I first started working when I got out of the military, I was working in the communication side of the house, working for GTE at the time. And at that point in time, in the late 90s, the only people who could make money off of cell phones, which were around, were people who built towers or people who built cell phones, the actual phones. And then you have Apple comes out with an iPhone, a smartphone, and now the entire world changes because Now, all of the app providers, everybody can make that into a platform they can use to deliver stuff. Suddenly, the phone provider is not the one that's making all the money. The platform provider is not the one making all the money. It's all the sub-platforms, all the applications that are being run across that, many of which are owned and controlled by the platform providers. But
Sure.
still, it's this idea of this flexible platform. And if you create something that's flexible, people will find a way to use it.
Yeah, and they'll demand it to some degree too, right? Because then they build reliability in the brand and everything that comes with it. And so if you're not continually evolving or ideating, that in itself loses confidence in the brand, especially as these things are interoperable.
And that's the platform play too, right? Which is the platform's wonderful, but how flexible is that platform? How many things can you do across that platform? That's what investors are looking for as well, right? They're looking for that flexible and agile platform play where I can do more and more things on top of it. It's not a single solution set. Now, from a bigger business perspective, it opens up the aperture very wide for companies to be acquired. I think when you look at the market, especially in the national security defense world, I think space is also very similar to that. There are so many companies that are out there that have great technology, but not necessarily great business models. So the opportunities for mergers, joint ventures, acquisitions to create bigger and better platform plays, now you start seeing more and more of that occurring inside the market. And I think that the days of I'm going to start a company with two kids in a garage, it's going to grow and become a multi-billion-dollar business are going to become even more rare because somebody else already owns a large portion of the ecosystem. How do I plug into that ecosystem? That's a tough thing for a lot of founders to realize that, hey, maybe you are just a component provider. But that doesn't mean it's not a great and viable business. It doesn't mean that you don't have something that's fantastic and you can sell it to multiple people. But you have to recognize, hey, maybe I'm not taking this all the way through an IPO and becoming a multi-billionaire going into it. Maybe I'm only going to make $100 million and sell it to somebody.
As a consolidate, what do they say? I'm blanking on. Yeah, consolation prize. Thank you.
Yeah, only $100 million.
Only. Thank you for participating in today's talk show, Rich. I really go back to you. In my mind, you're one of the pillars here in the Austin ecosystem from when I arrived until today, and I know continuing. You've seen change. You've seen it from corporate, and you bring this experience here to Austin. You've seen multiple startups, right? We grew up in that ecosystem across the street where you see the ideation of great ideas, and you've seen those that have actually carried it forward. Now, as an investor, what are you looking for? Is it the tech or really the team or the transition that you find to be in a place to support that growth? Obviously, for the return to the LPs, what's that decision support matrix in your head?
I always default back to what I've always referred to as the Amazon answer, which is it depends.
Right.
But I think that I'm a little bit against. A lot of people tell you it's the founders. It's only about the founders. If there's no there, if there's no product, if there's no concept, it doesn't matter who the founders are. So obviously there has to be the idea has to be solid. But then it really does become the founders, because the founders are what will tell you, or the leadership team, if the company's advanced a little bit, will tell you whether they're going to achieve the success that they're putting forward with. Sometimes those founders or leadership team need an assist, right? It's a first-time founder, never been a CEO. Now the company's 20 people and the world's changing around them, right? They have to make that decision of, am I a CEO? Or am I a founder entrepreneur, right? So when a company grows to a certain size, as we always say, you have to be able to fire your friends, right? You have to be able to take hard decisions. That it's really tough when you've been working with people for forever, but maybe they were research and development guys, and now you're a product shop. You're not an R&D shop. That kind of ability to be flexible is what I look for in the founders I work with, right? I'm at a certain stage, right? So the company's ready to scale. That flexibility and also the ability to be self-critical, that vocally self-critical piece is so important. They have to look at it and say, hey, where am I weak? Maybe I really want to be the CEO of this company. Maybe I need to go take classes at UT, get some leadership classes in here. Maybe I need to learn a bit more about contracting and finance and go do some stuff in there. But that flexibility personally and then professionally to realize, hey, I think you're a great guy, but you're really not cut out to be the CEO. You're a tech guy. You should be the CTO of the company, or you're a business organizations guy. You should be the COO. Maybe we need to bring in a CEO to do that. Hard discussion to have with
Especially to be
founders,
self-aware, right?
but it's so important if you realize that you want to grow and scale and you really want to get to that point there, you have to recognize when you need to bring in a pro. And maybe you are great for the CEO. What you need to bring in is a chief of sales, right? Whatever it is, that recognition of what you do well and what you don't do well. Too many founders, especially serial founders, I find, begin to believe their own press clippings, and having that wherewithal to recognize, no, actually, I don't know this market well, or I don't know how we're going to get to the next stage here. I need to come in with that connection. But that's also where the investors can get involved too, right? So you can have a commercial CEO that says, I don't know anything about the defense community. I don't know how to go in and approach this. I think I have something that works, but I don't know how to approach it. That's how they can find partners that can help them through that whole partnership model, whether it's an incubator accelerator if you're early in your business stage, or it's a business consulting service, or it's even just finding that kind of mentor that's out there that can help you through the process. One of the things that we built our firm around was having a lot of operating partners, deep expertise on our areas. And so we're not just about writing a check. We're about, once you've done that, how do you help people get to market?
Right.
Building a go-to-market plan is one thing. Actually achieving, getting to market, that's something else. And so finding that way to work with them. We put a lot of time and effort in with the companies once we invest in them. And I think that's the key to success for the founder side of the house when they're working with investors, is who's that investor that's going to bring that expertise, experience, skill sets, or, in some cases, it's just plain chutzpah to the table to help us push this ball forward. Because sometimes you just need someone who's a bulldog that's just going to go in there and fight for it because, hey, there are a lot of people already in the market. There are a lot of prime contractors or people who already own the contracts. And guess what? They don't want you in their space. And so you got to have that ability to kind of dig in it. And
sometimes that's the challenge. That's the journey itself, right?
Sometimes it's your opportunity too, though. Look, these prime contractors, they have huge business commitments. They need innovative partners. They need innovative technologies. They need new blood to come in and support them. And that doesn't mean they have to acquire you. It could just be a partnership. It could be a joint venture with them. So kind of finding that way to maneuver through the space. But again, it becomes really hard if you don't have any entry into the market anyways. If you don't know the players, if you don't know who's who in the zoo and you can't figure out where to take your next steps at. That's where this whole ability to connect into the ecosystems, which is, and you've heard me talk about this before, why I've always loved the Austin ecosystem. I've never worked in a place, I've been in Silicon Valley, been in the DC area, been up in the Boston area. My team, when I was at Amazon, was spread around the world. Austin has this unique place where even people who are your competitors will take time to talk with you, share experiences with you, and tell you about, oh, hey, I know a great accountant who can help you with this here. Or let me tell you what you shouldn't do because I learned this the hard way.
Right. Yeah. Sharing.
And that is unique here. In Silicon Valley, you get a lot more, it's a competition for everything. Competition for customers, competition for talent, competition for funding, competition for everything. And so everybody sees you as a competitor and they don't want to work with it. Here, when you talk to an investor, the investor will say, hey, Mark, love your company. You're not for me. You're not in my thesis. You're too early for me. You're too late for me, whatever. Let me connect you to the guys I know who are interested in that. And that is unique to this area. Others are trying to kind of come up with that, but I think that's why Austin has grown. When I first got here, there was the 12th largest startup ecosystem, and I think the latest numbers are at
Six.
sixth.
Yes.
So we've slowly but surely seen this increase going into it, and that's because of this collegial atmosphere that's here.
I think we have to protect that too, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
going to be the difficult part, especially as buildings are going up by the second. I think the state bird now is an actual crane because it's moving around, or at least within the city. Rich, you mentioned operating partners, and what I've seen sometimes within the venture capital ecosystem is that, and just like anybody, they get comfortable with what they know, and that's usually where they're surrounded by. That may be part of their thesis, but you are operating in a firm that is tackling global opportunities and the synchronization between three countries. I don't know if you want to talk about that because, it's one thing just to say I'm in this industry vertical. I think your venture arm and company has taken on a mass problem set in their thesis. And so how do you tackle that? How do you guys continue to find success? Because you guys are quite successful.
Well, when we started the firm, when we started, building out to kind of what our model was going to be, AUKUS had just come into play, right? It had just been passed. They were going through that, and it's the Australia, US, UK alliance. Closest allies we have. If you've been in the military in the last 50 years, at some point you've deployed with either a Brit or an Aussie, right? So we're used to working together with it. The intelligence community for 50 years has had the Five Eyes community, right? US, UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. And the U.S. has always had a special relationship with Canada because our technology ecosystems, banking ecosystems, look at the car systems that are across over the borders here. So we've always had that. And being part of NORAD, they could sell directly into the U.S. Defense Department, Canadian companies, and U.S. companies could outsource into Canada. AUKUS was really meant to kind of extend that. Originally, it was about the nuclear submarines, but then it became about Pillar 2, which is about technology innovations and the areas of focus and space and quantum and AI and cyber, all those things that are of huge interest to our countries. So we built a firm where we have partners in the US, UK, and Australia, national security professionals from all three countries to try to take advantage of that. And we've really focused on kind of these global challenges, but also the ability to grow your business globally, right? So having a singular market that you're delivering to is great. If you can add a second, if you can add a third, that's great. I've been asked why we didn't do NATO, and I think the challenge with NATO has always been NATO is not a purchasing authority, right? Just like people talk about the European defense.
My brother, I can hear my brother right now because there was a Bernie Mac television show where he says, I don't know who NATO is. NATO is actually a name. I'm sorry if I'm giggling. I'm not laughing at you, but
No.
One of the other things that you mentioned, just to double click on it, is AUKUS, they're calling out it by country. I don't know NATO to be a singular call out of those individual companies or individual countries, right?
So AUKUS was really pulled together because, A, they're our closest allies, but also our financial systems are tightly intertwined.
Absolutely.
Our trade economies are tightly intertwined, right? We've invested in each other's countries a lot. So, I mean, there's always been that. The challenge with something like a NATO is that people talk about the European defense community. There is no European defense.
Right.
There's defense technologies in Europe, in the individual countries, but Europe does not buy something. NATO does not buy something. And from an investor standpoint, if you ain't got the cash, you don't matter.
Right.
And so how do we help the countries go into that? The US, the UK, and Australia made deep commitments into working together in this. We made changes to our import-export controls. All three countries did. We made changes to our ability to invest in each country to allow US investors to invest in Australian companies and in the national security domain. Whereas, it's always been a challenge for US investors that are investing in a defense company that you can't invest in overseas companies too, and you create that conflict. So they cleaned that up a bit for us, and so it made it so we could do those investments. But I really think that what drove it was we have a common challenge we're all facing. And let's be blunt, it's China. And China has been at war with us for 40 years. We're just now beginning to think that maybe we're in conflict with China. And that change is really being felt in different ways around the world. But I think the UK and the US and Australia started seeing it early. Now, it's still going to be a long challenge for us to face. Other global partners are key to this, whether it's Japan, whether it's Vietnam. Who would have thought at our age that Vietnam would become a close ally for the U.S.?
Absolutely.
Or the Philippines or Singapore, and there's all these other countries that matter.
I'm flying to Japan tomorrow, and I'll be there because you're right. It's absolutely important.
For us, when it comes to our national security.
Absolutely. I can just see it now, right? There's the Aussie ranching community, and even in the UK, there's this tie between the cowboys, right? But I think it's the culture, right? It's the culture. But you were starting to see some shifts in at least the policies that also need to align in order for this optimization of innovation and investment. Are you excited about the future right now, or do you see us all kind of figuring things out?
I'm a policy nerd, right? So I always pay a lot of attention.
I'm sorry to our listeners, I just opened it up.
Both from a policy and a political perspective, there are clearly changes going on with us. I think that the biggest thing for us since, let's say, World War I, with the Aussies and the Brits, is it has been a continuous positive allied relationship going into it. Maintaining that is so critical for us. That continuous there, we aren't conflicting with them. We've always been serving alongside them. We've always been working with them. Means that we have this kind of national conscience that extends across the three countries.
Right.
We see ourselves as allies.
Right.
We see ourselves as friends. Yes, we talk mad crap between us, but we've always seen ourselves in that piece. I think the policy challenges we have are much more in the economic policy challenges, because again, there's economic protectionism between all three of our countries, right? Each of our countries has to protect our ranchers. We have to protect our, people who are building energy import and export capabilities. We have to protect our technologies. The fact that we have such great intellectual property protections between the three countries is probably what lets us do what we do, because we each recognize each other's IP rights and patents and stuff like that.
Yeah, from a legal system, absolutely.
There's that legal kind of overflow that goes into it. I think the biggest challenge right now is the lack of continuity from the Trump administration in their policies. It's not that they have bad policies, it's their policies are constantly changing, whether, their tax policies, tariff, or anything that's going into it. We need to have, as an investor or as a company that's getting started in pursuing business, you need to have a level of consistency, and you can expect things not to change much. The biggest challenges I've faced or seen through the administration as it currently is just that they're constantly changing. And because they're constantly changing, you always are having to rethink, has something affecting what I'm doing right now? I'd like to see more consistency coming from them. Some of the policy changes overall have been very, very positive. I mean, the acquisition reforms, Lord almighty, those have been needed for as long as I've been in this domain. So for 40 plus years, it's been greatly needed. Phenomenal that they're doing some of those things. But the consistency in the changes, and when they make those changes, making sure that it's not changing and then changing again, changing again, changing again, because every time you change, it adds another layer of complexity, especially to small and early stage companies. They can't keep flexing around and doing more changes to it. So I'd like to see a little more consistency that comes out of that.
And the machine that supports them as well, right?
I think that's where places like the state of Texas can really help with that, because as the U.S. government does have its ups and downs that are going through that, you can kind of have that stable state and some additional pieces coming along. So for space companies being able to connect into the incredible Texas Space Commission or the Quantum Commission that's spinning up or all these other technology areas, it's funny to say that at the state level, you can get some consistency.
Right.
Because it's always been the other way around.
Right.
The federal government was the relatively consistent one. But I think that the Trump administration is trying to make such fundamental changes that there is going to be a lot of hiccup and up and down within the federal government until things begin to start balancing out. And I think you have some states like Texas are poised to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. There's the stability that's here. That's huge. When we look at where we are today, what are you most excited about? Not 5 years from now, but I mean like where we're going to be in 20 years. And I'm looking at this from almost the neutral, what's neutralized all business is really this proliferation of AI and the access to it. And that creates an opportunity, but also, like you said, the turbulence, and especially from everyone has experienced this at the same time. When you talk about Lockheed Martin down to the kid in the garage, right? So 20 years from now, what are we doing? Where are things at? And I know nobody has a crystal ball, but I'm interested to hear your perspective.
I think that we've gone through this wonderful phase of spin up from AI. And everybody's like all the opportunity and potential for it. And now the consequences of AI are starting to hit us. And putting aside the social consequences of it, AI consumption of power, AI consumption of water, AI consumption of compute resources that would otherwise be used for other stuff is beginning to really hit people hard. And now that more and more of these AI companies are trying to turn their AI capabilities into revenue, suddenly the costs are changing. It's not dissimilar to what happened during the dot-com revolution, when these companies finally started trying to make money off of it and people started realizing the bills they were going to have to pay. It kind of changed how people approached it. I think you're starting to see some of that now because just the cost of running it. People don't pay attention to how much bills they're running up whenever they use Claude every day.
Like these internet subscriptions that or even the magazines, and to your point, like, oh my gosh, now we're paying thousands of dollars in these micro purchases.
So I think that what's going to transform that is the next generation of the energy economy. I think that's kind of what's coming here. We all knew that fossil fuels were going to run out at some point or get to the point where they couldn't be our primary source of energy because we'll need the fossil fuels for medicinal purposes, for cosmetics, for all the other stuff that we use fossil fuels for. So I think next generation of the nuclear economy is exploding from small nuclear reactors like ALO, phenomenal Austin company, some of the micro nuclear reactors, and even nuclear reactors for space. So I think that energy economy is there. I think battery technology is going to go through a fundamental shift. Because it's necessary. So there's so much research going into what's next. The NiCad batteries and lithium-ion batteries have been great for what they're used for, but what's next? What's going to be that next?
Yeah, I know some would say, why did you throw out such a big number at 20? I mean, that's when the larger consumer base is going to be able to see the implementation of nuclear. That's not probably going to happen tomorrow. Right. So it's the infrastructure that needs to kind of be put in place for these technologies, the energy in itself.
Well, we need to think about it that way, right? Because right now, if I built a small nuclear reactor and I couldn't use it in most places because the energy transmission infrastructure isn't there. So we need to make those infrastructure investments. I think space is a huge interest to me, but also I think there's so much that's going to happen there. And when you look at what NASA is doing, they are looking 20 years out. So if we're going to have a cislunar and a lunar economy that's going to go there, what's the infrastructure that's going to need to be there for that lunar economy to grow? And they're starting to invest in the things that will enable that. That kind of looking forward model, I think, is huge. The mining and mineral industries could be could be, if we can tap into the asteroids, what a great
That would be
change
cool.
be going into it, or manufacturing of pollutive technologies in space, so things that we build that pollute, putting them into space. I think there's a huge potential for that in 20 years. Um, with the changes that have happened just in the last 10 years in the space launch industry, and how much the price for putting stuff in space has come down, and how much everything we use today is dependent on space and space collected data. I think that we're going to see more and more changes to that. But that also means now you're going to have more stuff in space. And we're going to do all that stuff in space. Luckily, space is kind of large.
Yeah.
So you have room
or
for
things maybe falling from space down, right? Like, oops.
Oh, and I equate that to when people were coming to the New World for the first time, right? You're going to have to accept a level of risk and a level of loss
Yes.
to operate there. That's easy to say. It's harder to deal with when it's, Challenger exploding, when it's, people's lives at risk. I love the autonomous systems. I think provide a lot of huge potential for that. But we've got to find a way to better leverage that. And then I think the final one for it, and it's what my kids are interested in, and what the kids that will be the next generation after that are interested in, which is we need to find technologies to help us reclaim our own planet and deal with pollution, to deal with, all of the oxygen challenges that we're facing around the world, water, deal with energy resources for everybody, all of that stuff. And we kind of look at it right now, and there's a kind of a pushback on anything that's eco-friendly. You talk to the young kids and the kids who are thinking about ideas of companies. I was with one of the university students. They're thinking about technologies going to that because it's not just a good idea. It's a money-making idea now.
Really? Money making. So we've had a lot of international companies coming in. The biggest thing that aligns with eco-friendliness are these carbon offset tax credits. So when you say money, what do you mean? Like,
if I come up with a technology to let me reclaim plastics or to leach minerals, rare earth minerals out of slag heaps, I'm dealing with those things and I'm generating huge potential profits for me, right? If I can go to slag heaps and turn it into rare earth minerals, I can make a lot of money off that. If I find a way to reclaim plastics, you know how much plastic waste we have around the world that could be turned into that? Suddenly there's a huge potential to make money off of that. The problem has always been is the energy intensive nature of it, but more and more of the technologies we're seeing that are being explored at the universities, they're still early. They're not there yet. They probably won't be there for 5 to 10 years, maybe faster if we take a real dive into it. A national security issue comes up, we're going to dive into it.
Right.
But that potential to turn that into a revenue making thing, that's where the interest comes to, because people step up and take notice when you can make lots of money at it.
That's right. And that's the first to find that advantage, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, those are the risk takers. Those are the wildcatters of the group. Rich, you and I know that sometimes books have a way of capturing the essence of now, if not shaping the future, even to the degree of policy. Freedom's Forge is a book that we're starting to see. I know that book came out a while ago, but you're starting to see at least the discussions and implementation of that, right? Where you have, I think I heard the SecDef talk about a new functional area or a new type of MOS, military occupation specialty, where they are going to be bringing in industry or spinning it out to some degree. What books do you think we should be reading or you are reading that would kind of help us understand the impacts of where we're going next?
I'm a huge believer in science fiction because it forces or it allows people to postulate what's possible without ever actually getting there yet, right? So if you look at Gene Roddenberry and what he did with Star Trek, if you look at some of the stuff written by Heinlein or Herbert or any of those out there, you can see this hey, what if we could do that?
Right.
And it gets people to think outside the box. And it's funny, it's not surprising when you talk to a lot of the big tech inventors. They loved science fiction. They loved those things because someone said, you could have a device where I could call between it. Well, what do you know? I got a
That's
cell
right.
phone now.
That's right.
Going in, and so I think there's been a lot of great writing on how we can look at ecosystems and change ecosystems at large, whether that's a technology ecosystem, whether it's a startup and innovation ecosystem, or whether it's the actual ecosystems we live within. I think that the postulations that occur within science fiction are great at getting you to think. Don't talk about what you think is possible now. Let's talk about what the art of the possible could be.
Right.
And I think that kind of really goes into it. I'm not as much into the, hey, this is the way we could change everything as it is today because it presupposes a political environment that doesn't exist.
Right.
Instead, I'd rather let's look at that horizon. Let's look at what happens if we're on the moon. Let's look at what happens when we've got colonization in Mars and we're mining asteroids in space and we're able to harvest stuff from the deep ocean and all of those things we can't do now. Let's think about it in those terms. I think they also look at, they're the first people to start talking about things like the impact of AI, right?
Absolutely.
The impact of autonomous systems and when they can go too far, going into that. We all know the Terminator kind of movies that go into it. Hey, that is a possible outcome, but there's also outcomes where you've got robots can be a great add-on to our society as well. So I think that those are what I always look at.
Yeah, and usually find those from books that then turn into movies, right? They have a way of visualizing those words in a way that inspires. But
Books? What do you mean? I love comic books.
Yes, that's right. You mentioned the Terminator model. I was watching a news report. There was a big African exercise. I forget the name of it, but something Lion, where they had overland AI out there. And they had this system maneuvering with an infantry unit. And it went to, the news reporter went to the back of the field service rep truck and it showed the box that was there, a big, huge red button there that said, that's the kill switch. If for whatever reason you think that there was a problem there, here is the kill switch. Do you start to think of that needs to be probably implemented in all autonomous systems where there's a kill switch? I mean, we go to a gas station, you see it right there. Press if something goes awry. And when we see these autonomous systems out there, I'm just interested to see if whether it goes too far. And then what are the contingencies that we would need to be able to implement?
I mean, I think that
since we're talking about the future,
right? No, you need fire extinguishers in a house because sometimes you light your kitchen on fire.
That's right. That's right.
And so, yeah, I think that we do need to have the ability to at least shut down systems going into it, or cause them to boot into a fail mode, and the fail mode maybe go into a docile mode rather than actually killing the systems because losing data is such a drag going into it. But what was it, 2 months ago? The Ukrainians took a position using autonomous systems only. I sent that article to every single person I know saying, pay attention. Pay attention. This is the future of war.
Oh, big time.
And the problem with there, and something that both you and I actively know, is if individual politicians feel that there are no people at risk, they will take risks that are also of challenge. So, if only robots are going to be harmed, why not do it? That is another thing we have to consider there too. So the ability to not just kill switches for that, but for command levels to make decisions that Mark is off the reservation. Stop Mark's access to it, not necessarily all access to it. I think there's a lot of challenges that we're going to have to face within that, because when people feel that there's no risk to them involved, they commit actions that they would not otherwise do.
And they're judged for it. They're judged for at scale, not for that isolated event and that time.
How long before those same systems are now in police departments?
Yeah.
At what point do you send in the police robot to do something that you would never tell a police officer to do? And the robot has not been trained to differentiate between people of this size and people of this size, right? All of those things, because the developers never thought you'd send it into a schoolyard, right? I mean, those are the kind of answers you get with that. Those are what I think it's both the ability to shut down certain decisions that are going into it, but now you're getting into a political discussion, and politics right now is a minefield that is so fraught with peril that I don't think there's an easy way through it.
When we talk about the security aspects of it, right? That's a fail-safe. When we talk about the vulnerabilities of those assets, you sit on boards of companies that are in that security space, especially from a software perspective. Where does AI help or hurt us when it's so accessible? What are you most excited about, and what are you concerned about with especially when it comes from software, and software is in everything, especially in hardware?
So I've already been concerned for probably the last 20 years that we don't teach critical thinking enough anymore. And the lack of critical thinking causes major issues. AI is exacerbating that, because now I don't need to do critical thinking. I can have AI think for me. So the ability to think rationally and work your way through a problem, what ifs and if-thens and all of that stuff, that's going to be a major challenge there. The other thing I think about AI is it's not a replacement, it's an enabler. I use AI all the time to pull together data for me that I can then dig in and look at.
But to your point, you're a critical thinker.
Yeah.
You've got a framework.
It's finding that balance where AI can feed you drafts, feed you places you should look, or feed you things that you need to dig in deeper on, or raise. It's really good at raising where there's issues of either conflict or overlap, but it's not really good at thinking in a new thought line. It's not very good at that. It's only going to get better. So that means in a few years, maybe it'll start doing that, but that means less and less critical thinking, and especially from a risk perspective, less and less thinking by decision makers about the implications of the decision they make. They get fixated on the decision and why they're making the decision, but not what the cascading effects of those decisions are. And that's where I see the risk at. The good news is AI can help you think about what are those cascading risks. And I think if it's used properly, a senior decision maker, whether it's a government or military person, can say, this is what I want to do. What are the potential unintended consequences? And get responses back to that. That I think would be useful, but that requires you to be critically thinking enough to say there are unintended consequences to any decision I make. What are those unintended consequences?
Yeah, Claude or GPT didn't tell me that I should think about the counterpoint.
And it's the hallucination aspect of it too.
That too, yeah.
Claude is only as good as the information that goes in. And we for years have known garbage in, garbage out is a reality in any kind of analytics.
100%.
And people now are saying, well, if Claude saw it, it must be the right data. That's not necessarily true. It might have bad data, it might have misinterpreted data, or it might not have the data to make the correct answer. So it gives you an answer based on the data it has available.
Rich, I'm super excited that we got a chance to talk, and I want to do more of this with you. But right now, what you're doing, how can people help you? How can people find you? How can they really access you and your team in order to be able to make better investments, especially when it has global impact?
So I'm always open to learning about new companies, even if they're too early for me. The best way to get to know a company is to get to know the company, and then stay with them over time, even if they're too early for me. For other investors, I think, and I mentioned this a little bit before about why I like about the Austin ecosystem. I see companies that are too early for me, and I refer them to people I know that are earlier stage investors. My best potential companies come because I know the investors who are already working with them, and I know what they're going to need, and I know that they have a certain level of maturity because they've worked with those investors. Same thing holds true on the other side of it. I've worked with a lot of the larger investors who do later stage or private equity investment, who they know if we've been working with a company, we'll be able to deliver that company.
The resiliency of a network, right?
Yep. And so I'm always looking to expand that network. I'm always willing to learn about new capabilities that are out there, especially, the best time to talk to an investor is when you don't need their money.
Right.
So I encourage anybody who's at the earlier stage who thinks they have something that, hey, maybe it's going to be 2 years before you're ready to really talk to me, but I'd rather know about you now and start learning a little bit more about it and digging into it. So I always am doing that. I live in LinkedIn, so people can always find me through my LinkedIn. I speak at lots of conferences and stuff, and I've met a lot of great companies at them, some of which I've invested in since then. So it's that kind of living relationship that you establish with them, whether it's the investor, whether it's the employees, or whether it's the company itself. There's always that relationship advantage that goes into it.
And Rich, the last thing I'll tell you, right, you need to be empowered with those resources so that you can continue to deliver bigger and better things at a national scale. Where do you find those supporters? And what would you say to those supporters in order to kind of believe in the vision or thesis and its relevance?
Well, I think that I've always looked for those investors who realize that, hey, look, I'm interested in national security, but it's not my area of specialty. I made my money in real estate or whatever going into it. I grew up and know the defense and national security community deeply. I can be that kind of conduit to help them begin to enter into that market segment. So we're always looking for people who are interested in investing in those kind of capabilities. We're also recognize that we are not a one country team. To be a team, you need multiple players. So people who believe in our alliances. We built our firm around the idea of the alliance is the key to the future. And if somebody just has really deep interest in technologies that enable the success and the safety of our country, I'm always willing to talk to them. And as you said, I see more companies, more really good companies than I have money to invest. Mm-hmm. I'm always looking for the ability to extend that to more companies, and that requires more capital.
Yeah. I think it's the advantage of your group, right? Your professionals deeply understanding the national security apparatus and even the defense apparatus, but you have had exposure as well in the commercial space. And so, like you said, we always have that lens of duality in what we're doing. And even to bring in the opposite direction, right? In the traditionals from defense out, now it's commercial in.
Look, at heart, I'm a capitalist.
Right.
I believe we can be really successful. We can help our country. We can help the economy. We can help our ecosystems that are out there, the various kinds that are there, that we can even help the health of our planet and make money while doing it. I see no problem with that. And so we're always looking for that piece. It's the question of where do you draw the line between how much profit versus how much return you're providing. And we like to think of ourselves as national security first. And so because if we don't protect the national security of the U.S. and our close allies, we're not going to have the ability to spend any of the revenue and money that we make.
Absolutely. Rich, you're on a mission. It was very clear here. And one of the things that we ask folks is, and you've seen movies galore, those that are on a mission, they're usually given a call sign. So if you had to pick your own call sign, or if one been assigned to you, what is that? And to let people know, to really substantiate you're on a mission and you've been quite successful at it.
See, now that's just an unfair question because one should never assign their own call sign. Call sign should be assigned to you.
I forgot to say that. Yeah, normally in most situations you don't get to pick it, but in this, I'm going to let you. Not me. I'm going to let you. But what would it be, Rich? or who picked one for you? What should the audience know?
It's kind of painful to say, but my call sign was "Oops."
Oops. Okay, explain.
I messed something up and an oops came out in the middle of a call. And suddenly I was oops from then on.
All right. Well, that's going to stick. I don't think you're making many mistakes, and if you are, they're minor, and you're going to correct them very easily. Okay. The last thing I'll ask you is, now that you've been on this podcast, who else should we bring on?
I think that there's an enormous number of people who within the Austin ecosystem, but I'd really like to see you extend it to this broader South Central Texas area that's there. Some of the folks out of Houston. I know some great startup companies that are down there, some great investors that are
Absolutely.
down there. And then, of course, I'd definitely like to see you bring in some people from the space industry.
Love it. Yeah, we started with 2. We're definitely going to be doing more. In fact, spoiler alert, we're going to be launching our own space accelerator. So we're really deep diving into that ecosystem where it's the next frontier. And we all know that TV show where it said, Rich, thank you again, my friend.
All right, no problem.
Really appreciate it.